So, in CSGO, shotguns have recently been rather mediocre in their usage. Truthfully, I'm almost tempted to consider them as underused weapons. But besides farming money in casual to complete that ridiculous Bloodhound mission, I still see a fair amount of players using the Mag 7 in competitive, keeping the shotgun somewhat relative to the current meta.
They give a freebie to Cribs, although Snacks manages to find Cribs first. Olafmeister with the jumping swags! Drops Snacks! Triple kill for Olaf!
But what about the other, less popular shotguns, like the Nova, the Sawed-Off, and the XM1014? Surely the Mag 7 is not the only useful shotgun left. Well, I for one believe that there is another useful shotgun, and that it doesn't receive its due praises. So the question is, which then is the most underrated shotgun in CSGO? Alright, so before you guys dislike the video and berate me for choosing the XM1014 as most underrated shotgun in CSGO, give me a chance to explain my reasoning. For one, I'm not arguing about which shotgun is the best in CSGO, but instead I'm presenting my case as to why the XM1014 is better than most people think. I should also clarify that I don't believe that the Mag 7 qualifies as an underrated shotgun, as it's ordinarily the only shotgun I see used in competitive play. Not to mention that it's also the only shotgun endearingly known as the Swag 7. Anyhow, to expand on my reasoning, we will of course need to examine the weapon statistics to properly compare and contrast the shotguns in CSGO. Now, in general, the shotguns in CSGO have to be some of the most complex weapons to statistically break down, making them extremely difficult to compare accurately. Mostly because they fire multiple projectiles per shot, which gives each shotgun blast a degree of variance in terms of which hitboxes are triggered. I'll try to do my best to include and discuss these variables when applicable. With that being said, in the interest of time and my deteriorating sanity, I won't be able to cover every single aspect of the shotgun's statistical data. Instead, I will be focusing on the ones important to my comparisons, but I will try to include as much as I can. Of course, if you'd like to do some research of your own, you're more than welcome to check out Sloth's holistic CSGO weapon spreadsheet in the comment box below. So, to begin with, let us separate the 4 shotguns into 2 groups. Group A, containing the Mag 7 and Sawed-Off, and Group B, containing the Nova and the XM1014. Reason being is that the shotguns I have grouped together share similarities that promote certain playstyles that differ from their counterpart groups, but I'll elaborate more on that later. On average, shotguns in Group A inflict more raw damage per pellet, as the Mag 7 registers 30 damage per pellet, firing 8 pellets, while the Sawed-Off registers 32 damage per pellet, also firing 8 pellets. In Group B, the Nova registers 26 damage per pellet, firing 9 pellets, while the XM1014 registers 20 damage per pellet, firing 6 pellets. Naturally, as these are only raw damage figures, we also need to factor in armor penetration values. Group A's shotguns both have a 75% armor penetration rate, which is fairly decent and comparable to most rifles. On the other hand, in Group B, the Nova has a very low 50% armor penetration, while the XM1014 possesses the highest armor penetration out of all shotguns at 80%. Unfortunately, this is where things start to get rather complicated. Normally, for weapons, you can roughly calculate max damage against an armored individual by simply multiplying damage times armor penetration times hitbox multiplier. However, because shotguns fire multiple scattered projectiles in a single blast, you would have to consider every separate pellet with its own hitbox damage modification. In addition to factoring in weapon spread, accurately calculating every single possible pattern and its corresponding damage output is quite simply a nightmare. So, in the interest of my sanity, here's a very rough estimate of the minimum amount of pellets required to one-shot an armored enemy at point-blank range, with a standard 1x hitbox modifier. Keep in mind that this is a very rough estimate, but for the most part I'm confident in saying that unless you aim strictly for the legs, most shotguns have a good chance of killing enemies in close quarters. Now, after looking at these damage values, some of you may be wondering why you would ever choose shotguns in Group B over Group A. Well, one important advantage Group B has is its superior bullet range. In contrast to the weapons in Group A, shotguns in Group B possess the longer reaching bullet ranges by far. Taking a look at the statistics, we see that both the Nova and the XM1014 have a max range of 3,000 units, while the Mag 7's max range is less than half of that at 1,400 units. and the sawed-offs is a near quarter with a pitiful 650 units. In addition, after 500 units, shotguns in Group A have a 55% damage falloff, while shotguns in Group B are almost only half of that at 30% falloff. Anyhow, moving on. Let's take a quick look at the summary of all shotgun weapon and accuracy. In the interest of time, I've listed all of the recoil amounts as well as weapon inaccuracies for shotguns while standing, running, jumping, and firing. So, based off these numbers, we can conclude that for the most part, weapons in Group A receive more recoil and weapon inaccuracies, specifically while standing, crouching, or firing. Conversely, weapons in Group B possess more weapon inaccuracies while running and jumping. Why is this important? Well, as I mentioned before, these weapon statistics demonstrate the different playstyles each group of shotguns exceeds at. For example, Group A, with its exceptional damage output and movement accuracy, is best suited to a quote-unquote peekaboo playstyle, which can be best explained as pseudo-guerrilla tactics, where you peek, shoot, then immediately run back into cover to rinse and repeat. Group B, on the other hand, favors a more traditional approach to shooting. With its superior standing and firing accuracy, these weapons are best used from the stationary positions, as they are also able to engage targets more effectively at further ranges. But more on that later. For now, let us focus on the most important attribute of the XM1014 that I have yet to mention. That, of course, is the fact that the XM1014 is the fastest firing shotgun in CSGO. Because of this, the auto shotgun has a fire rate of 171.41 rounds per minute, which is more than double that of all other shotguns. The simplest way I have found to illustrate how this changes things is to look at the corresponding DPS. Building on the previously presented damage totals, we see that factoring in the automatic firing heavily increases damage output, favoring the XM1014 for both unarmored and armored individuals. Combined with the highest max bullet range, lowest recoil magnitude, and firing inaccuracies, the XM1014 is quite lethal indeed. However, even with these statistics presented, some of you may be asking, so why don't more people use the XM1014 then? Well, that's actually quite a loaded question. First, we have to understand how the recent Tech 9 and SMG buffs have negatively affected the usage of shotguns in the current CSGO meta. To summarize, after the initial Tech 9 buff, pistol armor became too strong for eco-round purchases in a competitive meta. So, to rebalance things, the developers decided that, instead of nerfing the Tech 9, that they would buff the SMGs overall to make them more effective in countering pistol armor buys as anti-eco weapons.
What the fuck?
Although that somewhat balanced things, it unfortunately left shotguns with the short end of the boomstick. Currently, shotguns are mostly overshadowed by the now buffed SMGs with their superior movement speed, accuracy, and overall lethality. Even with the shotgun's $900 kill reward, the utility and efficiency offered by the current SMGs makes the opportunity cost of buying said shotgun often impractical. Pistol armor still remains a very strong and popular strategy for eco rounds, effectively phasing out some shotguns like the Nova and the Sawed-Off, as they can no longer reliably compete as anti-eco weapons. Recalling the weapon statistics listed before, the Nova is typically awful against armored opponents with 50% armor penetration, as it requires 8 to 9 pellets to one-shot an enemy at close range. As for the Sawed-Off, well, let's just say that it was never really that good to begin with. And versus the Tech 9 5.7 armor, things aren't looking much better. On the flip side, in response to the new meta changes, the Mag 7 has now become the premier shotgun to use in CSGO. Why? Well, simply put, it is still the best at what it does, and what it does is dominate close quarters combat with the quote-unquote peekaboo playstyle. To reiterate, what I refer to as the peekaboo playstyle is a pseudo hit-and-run tactic, where you play a deadly game of peekaboo with your opponents. As previously shown, the Mag 7 statistics make it the best gun for this type of playstyle, as it is principally much better than the Sawed-Off. Its high damage output combined with its armor penetration give it excellent lethality when dealing with armored individuals, making it a formidable weapon against pistol armor buys. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the Mag 7 is one of the most dangerous weapons in CQC, because of its one-shot lethality combined with its ease of use. Sadly, as a result of the Mag 7's current success, combined with the Nova's present inadequacies, it seems like shotguns are currently being misunderstood as only effective in close quarters combat, as quote-unquote peekaboo weapons. I believe that it is this misconception, in conjunction with the general misuse of the XM1014, that is holding the auto shotgun back from mainstream success, which is why I regard it as the most underrated shotgun. As I have mentioned before, the XM1014 has a very different playstyle from the Mag 7, as it favors the more traditional style of shooting, where it's better to stop and shoot rather than run and gun. With the exception of camping close quarters, normally this style of play is ill-suited for shotguns against armor. But the key to the XM1014's success, where the others may have failed, is the fact that, again, that it is the fastest firing shotgun in CSGO. Obviously, the XM doesn't quite possess the same caliber of one-shot lethality that the Mag 7 does.
99-1. Oh my god.
But because you are able to follow up with subsequent rounds, it can be just as formidable in close quarters combat. In combination with its superior range and accuracy, the ability to fire quickly allows the XM1014 to engage multiple targets at both close and medium ranges, which is rather hard to do with any other shotgun. Often, people tend to underestimate the range of the XM1014. 3,000 units is actually pretty far, and although it's not practical or even recommended, being able to hit a target at that distance with a shotgun is not only impressive, but sometimes rather useful. All in all, I would argue that the lack of range and fire rate severely limits the other shotguns to primarily defensive roles, whereas the auto shotgun allows users to aggressively pursue enemies, as missing the first shot is much less likely to end in disaster as you are able to quickly fire consecutive shots. However, success with the XM1014 requires you to know how to use it effectively, which is more than just simply holding down mouse 1. There is an actual method to the madness. For the most part, when engaging targets at medium to long ranges with the XM, you will need to space your shots out accordingly. This is to increase your accuracy by lowering accumulated recoil. How long you need to pause depends on a couple factors, such as your stance and distance from the opponent. A good rule of thumb is that the farther away an enemy is, the more you should opt to crouch and the longer you should wait before firing consecutive shots. Now, this does require a bit of practice and game sense, knowing how to effectively adjust to each individual scenario, which is another reason why I feel that the weapon is underrated, as this aspect can be difficult but rewarding to master. If you do manage to put the time and effort into mastering the XM1014, you'll find that it can be more than just an anti-eco weapon, as the advantages I have previously mentioned carry over to gun rounds as well. Of course, I know what many of you are thinking. On gun rounds, any decent rifler would destroy you. But keep in mind that these clips that I have used are all taken from competitive matches, mostly against players who are ranked around Supreme Master First Class, so they're not exactly new players. That, and I'll be the first to admit that I am not a great player in general, so if I can do it, you can do it. In conclusion, in a post-pistol armor meta, enemy full saves have become rather infrequent and much harder to predict, negatively impacting the success rate of shotguns like the Nova or the Sawed-Off. Unlike those shotguns, now is the time for the XM1014 to surpass obscurity and flourish, as it provides the most utility out of all shotguns. For only $200 more than the Mag 7, the XM1014, which is available for both terrorist and counter-terrorist sides, is useful in both defensive and offensive engagements, for both close and medium ranges. In the end, that's just my opinion. Contrary to what some of you may think, I don't make these videos to try and prove that my opinions are 100% correct, which most of the time they're not. Instead, I purposely choose subjects that invite varied discussions to cultivate new ideas and hopefully expand everyone's knowledge of CSGO as a whole. So, even if you don't agree with what I've said, let me know. What do you think is the most underrated shotgun in CSGO? Until next time.
smoke. Grenade. Grenade out. Flashbang! Counter-terrorists win. Affirmative. I'm throwing smoke. Laying down smoke.
Amazing.